Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Mediwake, and I'm here with Lindsey Deluce and Kelsey McEwen, and welcome to CTV Your Morning, the podcast.
This week, Canadians are trying to make sense of our new relationship with the U.S.
And we'll also find out what it's like to live a secret and dangerous double life, all from a former FBI special agent, Scott Payne.
Thanks for joining us. Don't forget you can watch us live, CTV Your Morning, weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, 7 to 10 a.m. Atlantic on CTV CTV News Channel and on your CTV News app.
With the threat of annexation coming from the U.S., many Canadians are looking to our allies for assurances.
Business professor William Huggins examines the lack of response from the U.K.
British reporters have been asking UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer to comment on President Trump's threats of annexation to their ally, Canada. Starmer will only say that Canada is a historical ally. Why are we not hearing more from the UK?
It's hard to say with certainty why any international actor might be taking the position that it does or the actions that it does. But the best thing we can do to try to understand why people are doing what they're doing is to take a look at their specific context. If we try to understand the UK's behavior purely in terms of what's happening between Canada and the US, it seems as though they are missing an action. But it's important for us to remember, in the last decade, the UK lost its close trading partners in the EU, and it's been basically adrift for the last 8-9 years. They're in the middle of trying to cut a free trade deal with the United States themselves. And given the thin skin on the US president, my best estimate, personal estimate, would be that the UK is trying to ensure that it can still secure the economic interests of its own people, and is worried about the possibility of alienating the Americans to buddy up to the Canadians.
So putting it in plain terms, perhaps they're worried about ticking off President Trump as we are also in our own trade war with them. So they've stayed quiet on our front, fighting their own battles. I also want to highlight, this comes to the fore because within days of becoming Prime Minister, Liberal leader Mark Carney travels to Europe. He meets with what he called reliable allies, French President Macron, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and King Charles. And while President Macron called Canada in a press conference reliable, trustworthy, and a strong partner of France, we did not hear the same sort of public praise from Keir's Starmer. And that was really highlighted by British reporters. What do you have to say about that?
The big difference is that the Americans and the French, lumped in with the EU, already have their trade deal in place. The French know that they have reliable trade partners, even if things break down with the Americans. The British are not so sure. While the British may still be able to, tie in with NATO, they are effectively adrift. In many cases, they are still tied to the Commonwealth. They might still be tied in with NATO, but economically they're adrift on their own, and they're concerned about this. So they are playing it softer than the French, who are a little bit more happy to confront the Americans. If you notice, in terms of symbolic things, we get nuclear submarines from the French visiting and off of the East Coast. In terms of subtle signaling from the British, we have everything from King Charles providing a sword to his Canadian agents, etc. So what we have are subtle, quiet signals of support from people, as opposed to necessarily brash, loud ones that we might prefer.
Yeah,
I think the most important thing for Canadians to remember is that when national leaders meet together and discuss things like national security, they don't tell the press everything that they talk about.
Sure. But I think there is an expectation among Canadians that when you fight alongside a world war, when you've got the king's face on your money, when we share a head of state, that there is some expectation of, are we an ally or are we not? Is it fair to have that? I mean, we're a member of the Commonwealth, which I know is symbolic, but when the king's face is on the money and he's in the post office, you do expect some sort of a public, is it wrong to accept some sort of acknowledgement, some sort of allyship to be shown in a public way?
It's challenging to say. We could even say to the point where the Americans and the British were allies, and the British fought the Nazis without too much American help for the first couple of years of the war. So even though we may have various friends and various allies, what they're unlikely to do is engage in performative displays for the benefit of the public. And even though it may be unsettling to the public not to hear it, what really matters is how countries behave in a crisis, not what they say for performance purposes. And that's what I was trying to get at with the idea that national leaders don't always discuss the details of their discussion afterwards. For instance, if national leaders had gotten together to war game what could happen in an invasion of Canada, they certainly wouldn't discuss those details, nor would they discuss the notion that, Canada might be defended by either Britain or by France.
Right.
So while these discussions are certainly taking place, they're taking place out of the public eye for a reason.
The news has been overwhelming for many travelers, trying to keep up with all the changes and what it means when crossing the border. Travel journalist Lauren Christie is here to sort through some of that noise that we're hearing and arm us with the information that we need. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
It really does feel like, what are we supposed to bring? Is this change? Like, what really has changed?
Officially, Donald Trump on January 20th issued the executive order protecting the American people against alien invasion or against invasion. Mm-hmm. And basically that was done to get the Department of Homeland Security to ensure that aliens comply with their duty to register for the government. That's the only thing that officially changed. And that really applies mostly to Canadians who are going across land borders that are planning to stay in the U.S. for more than 30 days. The issue, I think, is some of the unofficial things. And what I mean by that is just that they've always had the ability to scrutinize and enforce, but I just feel like that's gotten heightened. And so you're hearing these stories that the rules haven't changed much, but their ability to question the rules and their desire to question the rules has heightened.
Okay, so let's get down to some specifics. Let's take Nexus, for example. Yep. What about Canadian travelers using Nexus?
Should be no problem. All you need is a valid passport or a trusted traveler card, which is what Nexus is. And so, I did an unofficial poll of some folks that I know that travel a lot, and their response was they didn't have any problems, but there were a few people that used Nexus that were surprised that they were asked questions, which normally you would fly through. So again, that heightened scrutiny, I think, is something that's real.
What kind of questions do you know? Did you ask them what they were being asked?
Just typical stuff like where are you staying? What are you doing? Nothing outrageous, but just things that they're not used to answering.
Okay, let's talk about green cards. If you're traveling on a green card, do you need different documents now?
No different documents. I think, again, with green cards and all of these things, just make sure that what you have is valid. Make sure you have your passport of country of origin, and just make sure everything is up to date. Again, because you will be under more scrutiny. So it's not that you need something different, but I think all those maybes and could be's assume that you will be.
Okay, that's a good way to approach it, right? So we've been hearing these stories about phones being checked and social media being checked. Okay, let's start with the basics here. Can they say, let me see your phone?
They can. They absolutely can.
And you have to give it over?
You do not have to give it over.
But,
but if you deny it, I would say I'd be a betting person right now that you will then be denied entry.
Right, which they have every right to do.
Which they have every right to do. So again, it's that heightened scrutiny. That rule about, checking your phone was there typically because they wanted to make sure they were checking for potential terrorists or drug smugglers or pornographers or whatever. But now they're using it against more regular folks that are traveling. So it feels like an invasion, but they have every right to do it. So it's just, I always say, it's just your level of comfort. If you don't want to be subject to that level of scrutiny, then you might want to think about going or not going. I'm not saying it's going to happen every time. I don't think it will, based on what I'm hearing.
Right.
But it could happen.
It could happen. What about social media? What are they looking for? Do you know?
They officially, if you look on what they officially say, they are not looking for anti-Trump rhetoric. That is their official statement. We don't know. And I think, we were talking before we started, the big part of all this is it's like everything else that Trump is doing, it's that chaos and the unknown. If the rules were simply there and you kind of felt like these are the rules moving forward and they're not going to change again, or they might not be interpreted a little bit differently, I think people would feel more comfortable. Officially, you should be fine. And again, anecdotally, for most people I hear, they're not having much problems at all. But you also hear anecdotally from some people that are. So it's that unknown that makes it difficult.
Yeah, I'm hearing some of those stories as well. So let's say your scenario is you get pulled aside and questioned by a customs officer. What's your best advice?
Remain professional and calm, be clear, consistent, confident in what you're saying. Give them the documentation. And honestly, if you're not sure why you're being asked something, it's okay to request clarification in a very calm, professional manner. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that.
Any final advice for Canadians traveling to the U.S.?
You know what? Check the Canadian Foreign Affairs website. The updated travel advisory is really good. It gives you the information and all the links. Check the links to those things, because again, my biggest concern is the constant changing that may come in other areas, and will it affect travel? Because chaos just makes it feel uncomfortable. Have your paperwork ready, know how long you're going to stay, where you're staying. Be prepared when you go in. Don't be fumbling through your bag or looking on your phone. Be ready to go.
What's that last one? Register with U.S. citizenship.
That's just to apply for those people going over 30. That does not apply to everybody. That is only the people. You're automatically done that in a way when you go through on an airline. So this is just for those land crossing people that are staying for over 30 days.
Next up, the ongoing trade war between Canada and the U.S. has us looking at the effects on large-scale industries. But what about small businesses and companies that aren't protected by unions and lobby groups?
So we spoke to one of them. Canadian entrepreneur Kyle Feigenbaum sells pet food often across the border, and he is worried import taxes could devastate his profit margins.
He joined us to highlight the real everyday impacts of the tariff war. Here's that interview now.
Canadian small business owners are bracing for another round of sweeping U.S. tariffs coming April 2nd, just 5 days from now. Some business owners, though, are already feeling the pain of U.S. tariffs. They're now worried about facing penalties through Ottawa's retaliatory tariffs as well. Kyle Feigenbaum is one of them. He is the CEO and co-founder of Healthy Bud. That's a gourmet dog food brand that's based in Toronto. But he's joining us from Orlando, Florida this morning. Welcome to your morning.
Good morning. Great to be here.
So you're in Florida for the Global Pet Expo. What kinds of conversations are you having with small business owners, both Canadian and American?
Yeah, it's a very interesting time for Canadian business owners in particular. So there's a lot of Canadian delegates, if you will, and companies out here selling into the U.S. Our brand in particular, Healthy Bud, we find ourselves in a very particular situation where we both manufacture product in Canada and we manufacture specialty product in the United States as well. The United States product is sold in the US, also Canada, and the Canadian product is sold in both Canada and the US. So we really are finding ourselves in these crossfires here.
Yeah, a lot of small businesses like yours are, as you described, getting caught in the crossfire of both the looming tariffs from the US and then our retaliatory measures here in Canada. Can you describe for us like what that looks like on paper for you, how that affects the flow of money and in and out of your business?
100%. I can tell you a story actually. So just quickly, on March 3rd, we had a notice really that came in over the weekend that U.S. tariffs were going to come into place. So that's on Canadian goods coming into the United States. And so what we did is proactively, we tried to get in front of it. And so we had a carrier pick up some product in Canada that was destined, so from British Columbia, destined for California to a customer there. And we were the importer on record. And so this product got picked up. We paid probably 2.5 times what we normally would pay in order to get it picked up in time and get it across the border before March 4th tariffs come into play. We had our product picked up. We were at the border about 7:40. So the driver had plenty of time to get across the border. He sent us a picture actually. And what he's mentioned is he's never seen the border so busy and jammed up. And so within, that amount of time, we thought, no problem, he's going to get across. He gets across 9:33. We think, great, we're having a celebration internally. March 4th, March 5th, March 6th, tariffs actually came into play, but then they were off. And these are the 25% tariffs, again, coming from Canadian goods into the United States. Yeah. March 7th, we ended up getting a bill, $6,000 from the US BCP. And what they're saying, first of all, we're confused. Why did this happen? Yeah. And then when we look for more information, what they're saying is, you know what? You entered at 9:33 p.m. PST, but US BCP runs on EST. So you were 33 minutes late. They slapped us with a $6,000 tariff. So we're already feeling the effects of what really could happen here. The scariest part, like you said, is the retaliatory tariffs.
Well, and so what I appreciate about this story, Kyle, is the fact that it feels up and down for us of a tariffs on, tariffs off, and what the percentages are, but this is how it directly affects you. I mean, we're talking in the minutes in difference between you paying $6,000 out of a small business and not, and that's on one order. When you are looking ahead, what could these penalties mean for the cost of trying to keep your business running?
Well, you said it perfectly. If you have this looming potential issue as a business owner, you cannot solve it, right? Mm-hmm. Give an entrepreneur any issue, and we're bred to be able to solve issues. But the problem is we really don't have the full picture and we don't have the full information. So you're really not able to plan. And that's what's detrimental and killing both Canadian small businesses in the pet industry, but really across the board. And, now it's starting to seem like these tariffs that are coming into play, at least from the U.S. administration, they're going to be much more targeted. And so as a U.S. small business owner, and I say this on behalf of myself, my whole Canadian team, we're an all Canadian team. I say this on behalf of other small businesses in Canada that the Canadian response needs to be extremely targeted. If it's not, it could be detrimental, and small businesses across Canada are really relying on our government to negotiate a positive outcome.
Can I ask you about survival in this tariff trade war? I mean, Canada, as a large industries, we're looking over to Europe for trade partners, but your trade partner is the United States. Your market is the United States. I'm assuming you don't have that option. Can you survive a trade war?
You know what? We've been building our business in Canada over the last 5 years. 80% of our business today is still Canadian. The other 20% is all USA. And our goal going into our 5th year of business here has been really to expand our business in the United States. Can we export to Europe? It's tough. Asia, there's opportunity. But the reality is that, we've always seen North America as one piece of land where we had free trade and we were able to communicate with each other, build business with each other. We're best friends, right? As two countries. And so this was our opportunity to expand, and can we survive it? On one end, yes, our goods going from Canada to the USA, we can survive it. But again, that's a small part of our business. The only reason why we can survive it is the FX is so strong.
Three, 2, 1.
15 years ago this week, people got their hands on the first generation of Apple's iPad.
I lined up at 7 p.m. last night.
Steve Jobs first spoke about the concept in the 80s, describing a great computer in a book that you can carry around and learn to use in 20 minutes. People's reactions were mixed at first, some people hating the name, but it caught on.
I feel like books are really old, and all my friends are gonna be super jealous because I don't have a book anymore. I just get an iPad.
Today, we're on version 11, and there's the iPad Mini, Air, and Pro. At last count, roughly 750 million iPads had been sold around the world.
"15 years of the iPad." It is wild when I think now about the everyday use of a device like that versus when it first came out, thinking, how am I ever going to use something like this? Like, heck, now we have one for our baseball team, and we record the kids and check their stances. And I'm saying this like I know what to look for.
Yeah.
But the coaches use it on a regular basis. And I don't know that I ever thought it would be that ingrained in our daily life.
There's a whole generation of kids who have only ever known iPads, which is wild to me.
Guys, so I was anchoring 15 years ago when this thing was launched, and I remember saying and having a full chat on air going, iPad, like what a terrible name.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's never gonna take off. I know. Never listened to my thoughts on technology. I thought it was pad for me was like it had a different meaning,
Yes,
right?
oh, I
so
remember
as a
that
female, I
conversation.
was like, iPad, no thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
I know.
Well, I've never thought of it that way
That's the only way I could think about it back in the day.
Yeah.
Remember when iPod seemed like the most normal thing, and now that sounds weird,
I know.
right?
Who uses the iPads most in your house? When our kids were little, we had one. My mom uses hers all
me
the
too.
time.
It's, I have to say, like parenting-wise, if I need an hour or 45 minutes to an hour of doing something, the iPads kick in. But we've had to set rules, obviously, right? Like every other household. So because they were using them too much, like we stopped using that kind of stuff during the week and only on weekends because there's so much access to so many things on the iPad. But it's also, for schoolwork and whatnot, it's very, very helpful for the kids not to be taking a computer to do their schoolwork, to be able to just take that device and travel with it.
Yeah, it has been such a game changer, I think, for so many families for that. It's the kids for us. And often it's when we're traveling, when we go to tournaments or whatever, the kids are all playing their different sport games on the iPad.
Yeah.
It's been nice for that, just to be able to have a different device other than maybe video games.
What was the game that you guys played? Oh, Fruit Ninja and what was it? Subway Rider, Subway Surfer?
I have no idea what you're talking
These are
about.
games that were like around like 10 years ago that everybody played on the iPad.
Are you a gamer?
Oh my God, no.
She's
These
an
are my kids,
OG.
but I was really really good at Fruit Ninja.
I bet.
Thanks for listening to Your Morning, the podcast. Every week, we bring you some of the most interesting conversation from our live show on a wide variety of topics. And of course, you can always join us live weekdays, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, 7 to 10 a.m. Atlantic, on CTV, on CTV News Channel, or on your CTV News app.
So do we hit the U.S. back with counter tariffs? Is that the best course of action? That is the question so many Canadians are debating right now.
Yeah, we had Professor Ian Lee on the show. He thinks we may be looking at our tariff response from the wrong perspective.
I want to ask you, how realistic is it to have this autonomy that Mr. Carney's speaking about?
With the greatest respect to Mark Carney, who I do respect, he's a highly intelligent, educated individual, but we have to be evidence-based. We share a house. Our marriage is in trouble, America and Canada. We live in the North American continent. 40 million Canadians are not moving out because we want to get a divorce. Neither are the 340 million Americans going to leave their half of the house. We've got to start talking. The marriage is in trouble. I completely agree with that. Lots of trouble. That means we've got to talk face to face and stop threatening each other. Let me just talk quickly about Europe, because I'm just surprised that, because he is such an intelligent and educated individual, Mr. Carney, his friend, Mario Draghi, also PhD in economics, former governor of the European Central Bank and Premier of Italy, published a report only 2 or 3 months ago saying that European Union economy is in crisis, collapsing productivity, collapsing competitiveness. Let me just throw a couple of quick metrics out. Their GDP, their income, average income per person is 1/2 of the United States. The poorest state in the entire US, Mississippi, has roughly the same income per person as the richest state in Europe, called Germany. Mm-hmm. They have a serious problem, like we do, by the way. We have collapsing productivity. Yeah. We have collapsing competitiveness. So the solution is not to say, I'm going to take our $1 trillion of trade both ways, which is what we have with the US, and somehow lift it up and carry it 10,000 kilometers across the Atlantic Ocean. It's not credible. I do believe in diversification, trade diversification, which points to our real problem, that our lack of competitiveness has been engineered by policies that have inhibited or prohibited competition, prohibited selling of our resources. Germany came begging for LNG last year, and we said, go away. So did Japan and South Korea. There's an op-ed in the Globe yesterday morning, by a geopolitical analyst in Germany. He says, let's be clear. He says, we don't want your cars. We want your natural resources.
Right.
And yet we've been blocking the development of our resources. You know, no pipeline bill, tanker ban bill, right. Caps on production oil and gas. We have been shooting ourselves in the foot for years. We've got to address, that's the real problem in this campaign. It is not the fact that we've got a very bad relationship right now with our partner.
But we do have to make our way in this disagreement, as you described it. So where do we even start as a country? If autonomy is not possible, we do have to find a way that is viable for us here in Canada, whether that's with the U.S. or not. So where do we start that process?
First off, we've got to take retaliatory tariffs off the table, because every study I've read, including the most recent excellent speech by the governor of the Bank of Canada only 2 weeks ago in Oakville, Mississauga, showed the incredibly destructive impact of tariffs and counter tariffs. In fact, here's our position in Canada. Tariffs are terrible. They're hurting us terribly. So let's go put more tariffs on the Canadian people to make us even worse off. That's saying I want to put the house fire out by pouring gasoline on the fire to put out the fire. No. That's going to make the fire worse, not better. So to your question, we've got to do what you have when you have a breakdown in a relationship. You got to talk face to face and have frank exchange. We need not just a new trade agreement. We need a comprehensive treaty with the United States. We got to sit down. I'm not meaning me, I mean Mr. Carney. He's the national leader. This can only occur at the level of the Prime Minister of Canada, face to face with the President of the United States, and saying, let's have a talk. Mr. President Trump, you say you're the deal maker. You wrote the book, The Art of the Deal. We want to now deal.
Oh, this is a good story. Have you ever wondered what it's really like to go undercover as an FBI special agent? Our next guest lived that life, infiltrating biker gangs and white supremacy groups. He was once referred to as, quote, Hillbilly Donnie Brasco. And if you're smiling at that, it's not a joke. The real-life legendary Donnie Brasco, a.k.a. Joe Pistone, was one of his instructors in the FBI. Our guest's name is Scott Payne, codename Pale Horse. Scott is joining us this morning with some of the shareable parts, at least, of his incredible career. Good morning. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Scott, you are writing this as a retired FBI special agent. You've decades of experience. So I'm curious, when you're putting it to paper, how tricky is it for you to keep enough detail in here to engage us as readers, but then leave out enough detail so that you're not compromising or revealing current FBI operations?
It's a great question. I was hyper vigilant when we did the book to not give away tradecraft. That's the big thing, because there's still people out there doing undercover. So if we talk about like where I put cameras, how we hide stuff, surveillance techniques, that we don't give away. But with my stories, as long as everything that I tell in the book, all the cases are unclassified, they're all adjudicated, everybody's pled guilty. There's no active undercovers, active sources, or active operatives. And as long as you stay out of that realm, you should be able to tell your story pretty good. And I'm very transparent in the book.
Well, yeah, and I mean, there is enough detail that you actually paint a really clear picture. I mean, you can see yourself in some of these rooms. You infiltrated biker gangs and white supremacist groups. You got these people not only to believe that you were one of them, but they really trusted you. There's one biker in here that you call Scott T, who you bonded with, and I want to read this quote from the book. It was about as close a friendship as was possible under the circumstances. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I was going to the dark side, but I loved that guy. He ended up serving a 7-year sentence because of you. So how do you reconcile those real, true love friendship bonds with real consequences?
It's not easy. Some people will be like, oh, you're a rat, you're not trustworthy. That's not it. You're a law enforcement officer. Your job is to enforce the law and to keep the peace. So sometimes you go on an undercover, you're in there 5 months and you find out, look, they're not doing anything illegal or anything that meets the standard. But building those relationships is if you're human, I mean, of course we're human, but sometimes it's hard not to make that special bond. But you have to be able to figure out a way in your own mind how you're going to rationalize the fact that somebody you befriended, you're now gathering evidence against, and eventually you're going to betray that relationship.
The FBI has this unit called Safeguard, and this was developed to preserve the psychological well-being of undercover agents. And they check in, they make sure you're mentally okay, because as you were just describing, you're living this sort of duplicitous existence. Would you say that this unit is effective?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. It's needed. And that's at a federal level. In the FBI, we had that. If you are an active undercover, you're mandatorily, you have to get psychologically assessed a minimum of twice a year. If you're going through some hairy stuff, like I mentioned in the book, being stripped in a basement, at gunpoint when you're wired, or family troubles at home, that unit is there to make sure your mental health is good, that your family is okay, and it's set up to take care of you.
Okay, let's get into some of those scenes that you describe in the book. One of them is a total jaw dropper. It takes place Halloween night, 2019. You've infiltrated a group of white supremacists, and you're posing as somebody who wants to join the group. And you take part in what ends up being a very graphic ceremony. For the sake of morning television, I'll just say it involves the blood of a goat. How do you maintain the level of commitment that you needed to pull that off convincingly while watching something that I imagine would disgust the average person?
It wasn't easy. And sometimes you don't know that's going to happen. Like, I'd heard talk about this ritual we were going to do, but they actually went out and got an animal, and we did that ritual. It's not, you're always trying to play chess. You're trying to stay 4 or 5 moves ahead of the targets. But in that instance, it's nothing technically illegal at the time, and I'm mirroring and I'm trying to blend in. So I participated in the ritual.
Yeah, the way that this is written, you describe it so well. Like I said in the beginning, it really does feel like you're in the room, and I'm seeing it through your eyes. Scott Payne, great to have you with us this morning.
Thank you very much.
And a reminder, you can read all about Scott's undercover adventures in his memoir, codename Pale Horse.
We hear a lot about the impact tariffs can have on the supply chain. Did you know Canada exports so much paper to the U.S. that there are now concerns about a particularly precious household item?
The ingredients to make toilet paper, like American toilet paper, come from Canada, and shortages could be coming for Americans.
Toilet paper may soon be harder to come by in the United States, all due to U.S. tariffs on Canada that are set to kick in next Wednesday. In 2023, nearly half of all U.S. toilet paper imports came from Canada. And Canadian producers are warning if the U.S. imposes a blanket 25% tariff on this country, well, U.S. consumers could face everything from toilet paper price hikes to supply shortages. For more what's behind these concerns, we're joined from Quebec City by Jean-Francois Samray. He's the CEO of the Quebec Forest Industry Council. Good morning.
Good morning.
Listen, we've talked about water, we've talked about electricity, we have talked about potash, now we're talking about toilet paper. The U.S. produces about 90% of its own toilet paper, but much of the materials that the U.S. factories use comes from us, from north of the border. In 2023, as just a setup for viewers, 51% of U.S. wood, pulp, and paper imports came from Canada. So how reliant is the U.S. on Canada for toilet paper?
Well, for time being, you're precisely right. The NBSK, the Northern Bleached Softwood Kraft, is coming from Canada. It's essential to give to toilet paper, to tissues. It's softness, but it is strength as well. So if there's a tariff added to Canadian paste or final end products, it will end up to being a pass-through to consumers, and sadly, it will definitely increase the cost of living of all U.S. consumers.
When you say supply shortage in toilet paper, a lot of us remember the pandemic, those empty shelves going from store to store, trying to find and then conserve the toilet paper that you have. If the U.S. imposes these tariffs next week, how serious is the risk of something similar happening again? How long would it take the effect to kick in?
Well, it would all depend of the how much companies have in their back room, but on their shelves. But one thing for sure is that during COVID, the industry all came up to the consumer and saying, "Hey, relax. We are an essential industry. We have workers that are manufacturing the goods, so you won't run out of them." For the time being, it is not the same situation now, because if there's shortage, people will go to buy the materials in order to not get to pay a higher price. So it will all depend, but one thing for sure, it will have an effect on the consumers. And how will the consumers react? Well, that's something that can be risky.
Just to put Canadians' minds at ease, would the same sort of supply issues affect us here in Canada, or is this just a U.S. issue?
Not at all. Products will remain at the same price. They're made in Canada, so they will still be products on the market. No problem at all. The difference is that in the U.S. there will be a tariff. There could be tariff added to the product, and price will jump, and therefore consumers will try to escape from that price hike, and then could empty the shelves.
You know, there was a time when April 2nd seemed so far off, and now it's next week. What are you hearing from your U.S. counterparts ahead of next week?
Well, we're hearing from the home builders. We're hearing from the Hardware Stores Association that what President Trump is putting on the table could be a long-term idea. But in the meantime, it doesn't bring a single added product on the market, so there will be a price jump. There will be shortage if President Trump is going that way. So they're pretty anxious on the U.S. side, because they've got some contract to build some houses, to supply hospital, to supply restaurant, to supply grocery stores. So the people that are anxious are the U.S. buyers.
All right, Jean-Francois Samray, CEO of the Quebec Forest Industry Council. Good to have you on this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
When you think toilet paper shortage, that takes you right back.
Oh, the pandemic days.
Yes, do you remember that?
Yes.
That was the first sign that things were going to be weird. Right? Like, it was the first time that we had really seen that, like, frenzy with the pandemic. And we were the household that I went to the grocery store and I saw everybody buying the toilet paper and I was like, this is crazy. I don't need to buy toilet paper. So I didn't. Got home, we had no toilet paper. So then I went back to the store. There was no toilet paper.
Yeah.
And I had to send out like a blast text to any person that I knew who I could see, which was basically only you guys at that point, who could give me toilet paper. And I came to work the next day and my boss, our executive producer, had put a bag of toilet paper outside my office. And that will always stand out to me as this weird definition of a very odd time of life that my coworker was giving me toilet paper.
Thank goodness. What would you have done?
Well, listen, at that point, we only had 4 of us in the house. Charlotte was still a glimmer in my eye at that point.
Oh, right.
That would have been bad. So with 2 boys, we go through like a case a week.
Oh, and you know what, like, and then cut to, there were signs in the aisle saying you could only take 1 or 2, like whatever it was.
Yeah.
There were rations on what toilet paper you could take.
And I don't know how you guys got around that, but we sent Daryl went and got 1 set, and I went and got
You
another
were
set.
that family.
We were that family.
Anne-Marie.
We have 5 people in our house. That's a lot of bums.
And and women too. Oh my gosh, I know, but it's a real possibility when you think about the impact. And we're learning a lot about how our trade system works, right? I think every Canadian is in terms of what is made here, what is made there, where did the hands cross in terms of we talk a lot about the auto industry, but it's things like this too, like household items that could be deeply impacted by the U.S. trade war that's happening.
Jacket and the thick accent, like maybe it's maybe not a lie, but if I lost it, said that I was fine. Said it from a coffin, remember how it died when you started walking. That's my life, that's my life.
Okay, that's it for the podcast today.
For more great conversations, don't forget to download or hit subscribe to Your Morning the Podcast on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
And of course, we would love for you to join us live weekday mornings on CTV CTV News Channel, or on your CTV News app. Start your morning with us.